What up? This is the Golden Era, and this is the NBA Draft. We are joined once again by the Athletics' Cam Rossini. You have seen his draft guides. You have seen his draft confidential. He was joining us for the draft preview. Back now for a live draft. Cam, thanks so much for coming back on the show, man.
Yeah, best day of the year. I'm excited to be here, get some live reactions. Let's do it.
So, a couple of housekeeping items, in case you haven't seen it. Two big trades have taken place that are going to impact this draft, both of them within the top of this class. The first one is the Los Angeles Clippers successfully move up. They make a big swing to move up to number three with the New Orleans Pelicans. In exchange, they are sending the number six overall pick, their own pick in 2035, the Wizards' first round pick in 2035, plus a pick swap in 2037 to the Pelicans to move up to number three. The assumption, Cam, has to be that they think they are going to be able to get Javon Boston at number three, and that somehow either the Clippers, Javon Boston's camp, whatever it may be, has convinced the 76ers that Javon Boston was never going to play in Philadelphia, making him, before he even plays a minute of NBA basketball, the most hated man in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I've gotta be asking what were the 76ers asking for that was so outrageous that they'll do all this just to get up to number three. I would take that exact same deal right there to get up to number two. So they must have been. I said they should have been asking for a king's ransom, and they legitimately must have been. So that's a big boy trade right there.
That screams to me that's an all NBA trade. That's where if I'm going and getting an all NBA guy, that's what I'm giving up for it. And it feels like the Clippers, who granted they have that extra piece of draft capital, the Wizards pick, which they got this past season when they sent Franklin Knox to the Wizards. That ends up being the asset I think that takes this thing over the top. If I'm Philadelphia, I think I'm just probably saying, and we talked about it in the draft preview, I don't want to move out of six. I like what I can get in the top five, and you can't convince me to fall out of the top six when I've got a chance to take Rhodes, Hightower, or Kuzma, and I think that's what we're seeing right here from Philadelphia. The other pick, the Detroit Pistons have moved up from number five to number four, and they've given up the number 15 overall pick to send to Memphis. So Memphis moving back one spot and also picking up another lottery selection. Memphis does not have their own first round pick until the next couple of drafts through a number of deals that they made in the previous regime with John Morant at the helm of that team. Um, I think this is a pretty good price to pay if you're Memphis. You move back one spot, you're still in. You're going to get the worst of what's remaining of those top guys, plus you get another lottery pick. I really don't hate this move for Memphis.
No, from a Memphis standpoint, I think that's just a no-brainer. You're still walking out with they could be walking out with the guy they covet the most just based on how this draft falls. But the Pistons, I'm curious to know what they are wanting it for. They must know their guy will be there at four. I personally I don't like making deals until I see the board itself, and I think the Grizzlies would have happily made that deal with the on the clock. But
Hmm.
I'm curious to see what the Pistons do there.
All right, that's what we've got leading up to it. I think this is going to be a pretty active draft. I think this is going to be an exciting one. We're going to dive in. We're headed over as Adam Silver approaches the podium, approaches the dais. We're headed into the NBA draft right now. All right, Adam Silver heading to the podium with the first draft pick in the 2034 class. This has to be Didi McDice. If it's anyone else, I would be stunned. And it is,
Yeah,
in fact,
no brainer.
Didi McDice. Cam, like you just said, no brainer. Didi McDice, we knew that he was going to Houston from the moment the Rockets landed the number one pick in this class.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be an instant franchise changer, and they were sitting not in a bad situation before this. So
Yeah.
I think they're easily making the playoffs this year. I think that they're working their way in. Didi McDice, they've got the guard, they've got the center, they're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, you drafted Cole Herringody last season. You in the teens. You took Malik Roll sixth overall. Um, if he can pan out, I thought that was a bit of a stretch last season, but if he can pan out, I love this team. And this is proof that I think there was some head scratching move, their head scratchers last season when they traded Killian Hayes for Trae Young because they wanted to make a push. They said, "What do we got to lose? We think we have a point guard of the future in Cole Herringody. We think we've got a wing of the future in Malik Roll, and we do have our center of the future in Darnell Gist." Now you still win the lottery, and then you get the for sure point guard of the future, and all it cost you was playing competitive basketball for a young team. So not only do you get the benefit of winning the lottery here, the Rockets got to eat their cake and have it too, or have their cake and eat it too, because they also end up with the best point guard that we've seen since probably Jalen Justice entered the league. Um, he's going to change this group, and we've seen a number of teams with you look at the Brooklyn Nets have done this, where they played Brighton Reed at the shooting guard position, despite him being 6'4". I think that they have now some flexibility to say maybe we could even go out and we could play him next to Cole Herringody, or we could try to maybe move Herringody, or we just naturally develop these pieces to have a pretty good wing rotation if D.D. McDyess is one of your two guards.
Yep. I agree with everything you said right there. I think they've made those head scratching moves in the past, which is why I wasn't entirely sure they'd be going DD McDyess #1, but it is a no brainer in my opinion. I think they A plus draft so far.
All right, we are headed now to Philadelphia as they head to the podium comes Adam Silver. And the Philadelphia 76ers are going to take Marquise Hightower at number 2. That tells us that what we thought we knew. We thought the Pelicans had moved back so that the number 3 pick could be made by the Clippers. That's come to fruition here with Hightower going number 2.
Yeah, I got to know what Javon Boston was telling the 76ers. I think if you're taking someone other than Boston there, it's Marquise Hightower. But if I don't know what he could have possibly told them to steer them away, if I'm the 76ers and he told me something like that, I maybe offer me your 2039 second round pick to move up from 2 to 3. Come away with something here. But I think that's a mistake that they don't come away with any extra assets. And they're not walking out with Javon Boston. I think I like the player, but they messed up here.
A huge opportunity for them to continue to add assets, and I think it's probably a situation where the Clippers, maybe let's say they called their bluff and they said, if the Sixers were saying we're going to draft Boston and we're or excuse me, the Clippers say we're going to move up, we're going to take Boston at 3 because we have a willing suitor with the Pelicans, and you are Philadelphia and you're saying nope, we're gonna sit right here and we're gonna take him, and you got scared off of that. I just think this was a situation where, like you said, they messed up, and they messed up by not just opening up the deck and saying, you know what, we are not going to keep playing hardball here. They played chicken and they ultimately lost, which means I mean, they get a good piece. Let's go positive. I think Marquise Hightower is a really good number 2 pick to make in a normal class. I think within this class, he's probably the number 2 guy if Javon Boston isn't there. But I think he's going to add a nice piece next to EJ Clarkson if he can stay healthy. And I think that was, correct me if I'm wrong, the big challenge on EJ Clarkson was a little bit of a health scare. This is just how Philadelphia operates. They draft guys. Hightower missed the first 10 games of the regular season with a knee injury. If he's healthy, I think you really like Hightower. It's just a matter of if that's going to actually be the case, or if that kind of knee scare was the one-time thing, or if it's going to be a long-term thing.
Yeah, they're the doctor out there has got his work cut out for him, keeping those two guys healthy. But if they do, I think they've got a heck of a 1-2 punch moving forward.
All right, number 3 pick now is Adam Silver heads to the podium with the Clippers, and this has to be Javon Boston going to the Clippers after a 2-year hiatus, and in fact, it is Javon Boston at long last through Barcelona, through New Orleans, finally is a Los Angeles Clipper. Cam, it's about damn time, and I'm glad this is behind us.
I'm glad it's over, but at the end of the day, I'm glad he got his way. He was made for the Clippers. He's a California guy, grew up a Clippers fan, but I'm old school. I wish he would have done it down the line in free agency, but you know what? The Clippers paid the price for it. They'll be feeling that trade for years to come.
Well, they're going to be feeling it, but they also are going to now have 2 guys with Javon Boston, Elijah Fossis, who I think are, I mean, all NBA potential out of Boston. Fossis was rookie of the year 2 years ago ahead of Alshon Webb, who won 6th man of the year as a rookie. So on the wing, maybe the hardest positions to get in the league in a conference where you've got the Clip or the Suns and the Warriors who both have a number of good wings out there. You've got the wing duo of the future with those two.
That might be the best 1-2 wing not right now, but
Sure.
fast forward 2, 3 years, and you could have 2 all NBA wings on the same team right there, and then you pair that with a nice point guard coming in, or I mean, they've got a good point guard. You pair that with 1, 2 other pieces, and you're looking at a high level ball team right there, ball club.
The Clippers won the 2020 NBA championship behind Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. They are going to be trying to do that again, repeat
Mhm.
that exact same roster approach with two dominant wings. This time, they have to pay a pretty price to get there, but at the very least, they are starting it off with something pretty solid. All right, let's go on as Adam Silver approaches. We got number 4 pick coming up next.
What these
That's
Pistons wanna do.
if you're the Pistons, where are you going with this? With Kuzma and Rhodes on the board.
I think I probably lean Kuzma.
All right.
I think he's like I said, he was that number one fit, and there we go. Yeah, like I was saying, that was my number one fit coming into the draft, and maybe they felt the exact same way, but that gives them someone great to pair alongside Gianni Giddens. Um, I think he can go in and average 20 points per game on this team as a rookie. Maybe even more. I'm not. I think that is a dream scenario at 4 for them. Coming into the year, Kuzma was that number 2 prospect, and they're getting him at number 4, obviously with the Javon Boston thing, and then the Marcus Hightower riser. I think Kuzma at 4 is a steal.
And I think this is who they clearly wanted to move up for. They didn't move up, giving up the number 15 pick to not take Kuzma. So you have to imagine they probably could have moved up to number 2 and they were probably taking Kuzma. I think this is a big win for them. And like we said on for the Clippers, we are seeing so many teams stack up as many dominant wings as they possibly can get. And now next to Giddens, who's a great three-point shooter, shot 37, 38% as a rookie, that would only go up. Now you're adding Kuzma, who's a perfectly good three-point shooter, but he's also a guy that can take guys off the dribble. You've got in two different franchises, wings of the future that I think you can compete in the next 3 years against the top teams in the NBA, and you might be able to be at the front of the class in the next 7 to 8 years with Kuzma and Giddens, and then on the opposite side with Fontsis and Boston. I love this pick. I love this pick, and I think it's about to get interesting at 6 because this has to be Jermaine Rhodes coming up next for the Memphis Grizzlies. I don't know how Memphis is not taking Jermaine Rhodes at this spot, and that's exactly what they do. So they get the 15 pick. I'll be interested to see who ends up there at 15 for them. But this is a big move. Your thoughts on Rhodes going to the Grizzlies?
Yeah, that was another fit I had for this team. In my mock, I had Rhodes going 4 to the Grizzlies and Kuzma going 5 to the Pistons. But I think that uh, my final mock is what I ended up having. He's going to be a ball player no matter where he goes. Like I said, he's been shooting it a lot better than he did at Missouri and all those workouts. Great defender. You're never going to be mad about having another 6'9" wing on the team. And now that trio of wings is gone, I'm curious to see where we go next.
Yeah, this is where the draft starts. And if I'm New Orleans, I think I might be trying to maybe you reach for Stephon. I mean, I don't love drafting for fits, but it feels like at 6, it's got to be somebody like Stephon Franklin or maybe Trey Orton, who you could try to throw in there. It's just this is a tough spot right now for New Orleans, and maybe a surprise of why they'd move back because what they need is what was already on the board.
Exactly. That's why, like I said, they got the King's ransom. They did. So you can't be mad about that. But man, it is a big drop off after that top 5. I think maybe they could make a play at Jared Edwards here. I think that he's probably the guy I like most on the board right now. Or maybe
Sure.
we see the Garbenko, the riser here. Let's take a look.
All right, Pelicans as Adam Silver approaches, they go with
There it is.
Stephon Franklin. So I don't think this is a reach. I mean, you had him at 7 on your, or guys bumped down to 8 on your draft board. So a perfectly fine spot for him to end up, as it was kind of mocked up pre class. But Stephon Franklin, decent, good mid range shooter. Didn't shoot great from deep, but you have to imagine as a good midi could translate to being able to shoot the ball from the perimeter as well.
Yeah, and I think he could pair well with that young core they've got. Baron Hunter and him, I don't think they'll have any issues meshing on the floor together. Franklin's more of the three wing forward, and Hunter's more of the four wing forward. So I see two different players with two different sets of strengths there.
All right, so the Pelicans move back from 3 to 6, where they get Franklin. That sends Dallas, who was considered somebody that could move back. They end up staying put there at number 7, and they're going to take maybe a shocking one here, Tajir Goodbay or Godbey from Texas A&M. So keeping the Texas product. Godbey, you had further down on your draft board, but a phenomenal wing defender at 6'8", 235. He was a guy that in recent mocks throughout the league, a lot of that was, hey, he could move up. Teams are really liking him, and Dallas loves him a lot to make him the 7th overall pick.
Yeah, he no questions asked. He's the best defender in this draft. He could defend 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever you want. I like I said, I just don't know how much the league values defense, but apparently the Mavs do. Definitely at a position of need for him, so he's filling a hole. They're getting better on defense. You can't be mad at the pick. I think that, like we said, they probably could have moved back and picked him a little bit later. But at the end of the day, he's a great player.
I mean, you've got Mason Holt at point guard. You've got Carlo Urqueg at the 3. You've got Braylon Adams at the 5. If I am sitting there and I've got to figure out, you know, what am I trying to do? I really don't mind Godbey here because Urqueg is going to be my primary creator. Mason Holt's going to be the secondary one. Adams is a good piece in his second year uh, down low. If I'm going to get a switchable wing defender, um, in a class that after those top 5 guys, I think it's kind of a toss up from 5 through the end of the lottery. I don't hate this pick. There's not a guy on the board right now that I like drastically more for Dallas. A Trey Orton I think is better. Jared Edwards might be better, but I think just adding a wing defender, which he's going to get those top assignments. We've just talked about the Pistons and the Clippers stacking up on wings. Tajir Gabe is going to be the guy that's defending him. And
Yep.
so now you've got your primary wing defender, which behind getting the primary wing creator should be priority number 2 for most every other team in the league. They just got him. Las Vegas now heads to the board. Plenty of room for improvement. This is a team with a lot of point guards. I'd be shocked if we see Jaden Bibbs there. And I speak too soon because the Las
Another
Vegas
one.
Lights, who have Johan Noah-Jovic as their starting point guard. They've got Jason Mills on this roster. They just added Jaden Bibbs. You had him at number 6 on your board. He ends up at number what 8. I'm surprised by it. This means they must be planning to move on from one of those guys.
Yeah, I think that all but means that they're moving someone, and maybe they're moving someone to make another pick later in this draft. Who knows? But I think Bibbs right there is a great pick. You can't be mad about an explosive guard. He'll run an offense well. I think he could come in and be a pretty solid scorer. Maybe a tad undersized at 6'1", but I mean he's excellent, excellent ball handler. He does a great job.
And Noah Jovic, of course, will be a free agent. So potentially they're just saying we're resetting this. Um, we're ready for the future. That sends us to number 9, where the Pelicans take to the board. They just drafted against Stephon Franklin. They've got 3 first-round picks, and they're going to take Simon Beneman, who you had at number 9 on your draft board. So falling right in that spot. He's a 38.9% three-point threat. This is a team with Ty Outlaw, who's a decent three-point shooter, but not great. Andre Schlorbeck, who's not a great three-point shooter. Baron Hunter's a work in progress. Stephon Franklin's a work in progress. Beneman is going to walk in as a center and probably be their best shooting for deep.
Yeah, he's a really came along his sophomore year at Wisconsin. Added some muscle. But the thing that people don't realize about him is he's such a good facilitator as well. I've been calling him. We haven't seen it in a while, but a Jokic light kind of guy. You cut out on me.
No, you got me.
I said sorry. I can't display the host screen for whatever reason. Sorry about that.
You're good.
I'll just try again. It must have. I think I must have timed out. I can start that again. Um, yeah, I like Simon Beneman there. He's a guy that they need something. They need a playmaker at the 5 spot, and that's one of his most underrated attributes. Is he he averaged nearly 4 assists a game this year for Wisconsin. And that just goes to show how hard of a worker is he went from looking right now 23% 3-point shooter to nearly 40% as a sophomore. And so he's a hard worker. He's in the gym. Maybe he's not as athletic as you'd like to see, but I think that he comes in and makes an immediate impact for the Pelicans.
All right, moving quickly. So Tariq Wheeler, their current starting center, I don't mind that one. Wheeler had a heck of a turnaround from that torn ACL when he was at Kentucky. Pelicans got a lot out of him, but adding a backup big is never, I think, a bad thing. So here come the Hawks at number 10. Again, we're into the range now where it's going to be tough to predict who's going where just because the top guys on this board have already been long gone. And that's where
Very
Jared
true.
Edwards at Ohio State is going to fall. Really great mid-range shooter, Cam. You had him kind of in this range on your draft board. I think he's got the upside to become a really nice piece for an Atlanta squad that's probably getting ready to maybe hit the reset button.
Yeah, I think, and they're getting a really good player right there at 10. In my latest mocks, I had him sliding, not sliding, moving up. Um, and great mid range. He'll extend that out to the 3-point line. There's no doubt in my mind about that. He's a guy with, like we said, best mid range in this draft, and there's no doubt in my mind he's going to slide that out to the 3-point line. Plays good defense on the other end as well. In my later mocks, I had him moving up draft boards into that top 5, 6, 7, 8 range. So to get him at 10, I'm considering that a win for Atlanta.
The Knicks up next, plenty of cap space and not a lot of assets after they moved on um, from Trey Young last season. 1 year left of Zion Williamson, so thinking they're probably looking to the future, and they're gonna get one. Yoko Soluade out of Nigeria, hyper athletic wing. I think you've coined him as the best wing in this draft. It's a project piece, but New York, I think, is in project mode right now.
Maybe not best wing, but definitely he's the most athletic wing,
Right,
and that
right.
says something with like Hightower's an athletic dude. Um, I think this kind of signals the New York Knicks view this as a multi-year rebuild because I do not think Joko Soluday is going to make an immediate impact for them. I think he's a fantastic player, but he's more of a project.
Hmm.
His sky is a ceiling for him. But or yeah, sky's the limit for the guy.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
he's raw. He is raw to say the least. But man, that athleticism. I mean, it's hard not to take a guy that high when he's that athletic.
All right, Charlotte Hornets now coming on to the board. They decide not to move off of this pick, and that means they're going to end up taking Matthias Gorbenko. A bit of a swing here. This is a team that needs a wing. They're getting one, and they're getting one with a guy that's kind of risen up the draft boards as of late here, Cam.
Yeah, we talked about them trying to move that pick for a small forward, and rather than move that pick, maybe that was their guy all along, and that he could be a immediate impact type of player there. Like you said, though, he did rise up draft boards at the end, and that is a big swing because there's a lot of mystery surrounding him.
Well, they get a guy that I like him. I like this fit. You get a big guy, and also to the fact that Robert Mack's 23. Jonathan Malhier is also 23. There's no real reason for this team in Charlotte to force the issue. And I think they did that a little bit when they went out and they traded for Brandon Ingram a couple years ago. And I think that kind of hamstrung them because that ended up being the class in which their pick ended up. I think it was number one overall a couple seasons ago. And so as opposed to having the number one overall pick to be able to add to this core, that was, I want to make sure I'm getting this one right. That was last season. So last season's pick ended up number one. They could have benefited from adding Baron Hunter, Yanni Giddens, Damian Pack, Malik Roll, who those guys all go in the top five or top six. Uh, Instead, that falls. And I think this patient approach now by the Hornets to hold off and get Gorbenko here, I think this is the right move for them as they try to kind of build a future for what this team looks like next to Mac and Malhior. All right, headed to 13. It's the Minnesota Timberwolves, the only playoff team picking in the lottery, and they go with the athletic Antoine Okoro out of UConn. This is a guy I really liked his upside. We talked about him in the pre-draft as one of the most athletic dudes, and they're getting a heck of a wing to play next to Shamar Poole, Malcolm Knight, and of course, Abiz Ojale.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he um, athletic dude. Really, one of his only knocks is that he struggles to put the ball on the floor. Is he the best 3 point shooter in the world? No, but you typically see guys with his build, this position, they develop into good 3 point shooters. And when basketball becomes a full time job, that 3 point percentage is going to rise. So if you could pair even just like a 35% 3 point shooter as opposed to the 25% 3 point shooter that he was at UConn, you've
Hmm.
got a all-star talent right there.
Yeah, I said it in the pre-draft is one of the guys I said I liked outside of the lottery because you can't teach athleticism. And now you're pairing him with some guys like Abiz Ojale, who's a 34-ish% three-point shooter, Shamar Poole and Malcolm Knight, who are going to take care of a lot of the things that Okoro doesn't do well. If he's not going to be an on-ball creator, that's fine. If he's just cutting off ball left and right, I actually really like that. And giving them another piece of a puzzle. The Wolves, I think, are slow building it, and adding Okoro is a fantastic way to do just that. We'll head to Denver, who doesn't have their own first round pick. This is through San Antonio. Of course, the Pelicans use theirs at number 9, and they're taking Ray-Sean Snyder out of Oral Roberts. Ray-Sean Snyder is a guy that kind of bounced around. Cam, I know that you've chronicled that one. He was out at, what was it, Kentucky before he heads over to Oral Roberts, where he really surpassed all expectations, 18 and 10 with 3 blocks per game for Oral Roberts last season.
Yeah, and he's a pretty solid athlete for being 7 foot, nearly 270. He is going to be an immediate impact on the defensive end. Just massive frame down there, pretty athletic for his size. Works really well on the pick and roll. I think that's a good pick. Is it the pick I would have made? Probably not. I think I like Trey Orton or Sol J. Crab a little bit more, but I'm not going to be mad about Rashawn Snyder being on my basketball team.
And he'll be able to work in the pick and roll with DeAndre Dawkins. You've got David Sevic, who they took in the lottery as a great three-point shooter last season. I think this is a great addition here for the Nuggets. As we move to 15, the Grizzlies is the second pick they picked up by trading back a spot, and they take Trey Orton. I think this is a huge win of a draft class right now for Memphis. You had Trey Orton number 7 on your board. They end up with him at number 15. I think this is a steal. Great three-point shooter, really great defender. He can switch across the perimeter at 6'10", 220. He's athletic enough to do that. This is a fantastic find, I think, for them to go 5 and 15 with what they just did.
Absolutely. If they would have made that swap and taken Trey Orton at 5, would it have been a slight reach? Yeah, but I don't think anyone would have batted an eye there if they took him at 5. And what they do, they end up with him at 15. So I mean, that's an absolute win of a deal for the Memphis Grizzlies, sliding back one spot and picking up Trey Orton to pair along. Who'd they end up with that for?
That was Rhodes, Jermaine Rhodes. They took
Jermaine
first.
Rhodes. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't be. That's a great draft so far.
All right, as we move to 16, that's the Sonics. They're looking for somebody to run next to Alshon Webb, and they're going to do that with Dion Ivey, the 6'6" wing out of USC. You had him further down on the board. You had him at 24, but really great defender, finishes well inside. He's a really good athletic wing. USC had a lot of them last season. He's not a great playmaker. He's not a great guy with the ball in his hands, but he doesn't need to be next to Alshon Webb and next to Alexander Sangalia. I love this pick for them. It fits a need for them, but also I think it's a high upside move for them.
I agree. And, I think maybe we're seeing a slight change in how teams are valuing that wing position. We saw 3 wings fly off the board. And then who was our next wing we saw? We saw Tahir Godby. We're seeing Dion Ivey come off the board a little bit earlier than we think we will. I think these teams are trying to battle some of these elite level wings with some elite level defense. And so
Hmm.
that could be the shift that we're seeing here, or why some of these guys are rising up boards a little bit.
All right, Atlanta, their second first round pick here. They've got an opportunity to add next to Jared Edwards, who they took at 10, and they're going to go with Kentucky's Derek Hardaway. So adding a pair of wings, 6'5" Derek Hardaway next to a 6'6" Jared Edwards. Have to imagine one of those two guys is going to move to the 3, which probably means they're getting ready to, I would say, shop AJ West, who started for them at the 4 or at the 3 last season. But if you're trying to build a future, I think there's worse places to start than with Derek Hardaway and Jared Edwards.
Yeah, if he would have gone back to school for a year and done the exact same thing he did at Kentucky, we're looking at a top 5 pick from Derek Hardaway. I think that he started on the bench, coming off the bench as a 6th man, and he couldn't be denied.
Hmm.
He worked his way into the starting lineup and never looked back. And this guy, he's a guy who can drive with the best of them, plays great ISO ball, which is what we like to see in the NBA. He's going to make an immediate impact for the Hawks.
And they could even slide him to the one, and you could end up with a 6'5" point guard, a 6'6" shooting guard, and AJ West at 6'7" at the three if they decide to hang on to him and instead move off of Xavier Ashley, who they have as point guard. All of that built around Matthias Gore. What's Matthias's last name? It always escapes me, and I'm always gonna
Uh,
botch it.
Gorbenko?
Yes, yes, who
Yep.
they took last season. No, I beg your pardon.
Oh,
They took Miska Zurich. I'm just
Mizka
confusing my
Zurich. Yep.
international pieces. Miska Zurich, they took a number 7 last season at the five. So I really like this roster. It's a young group. They also took Daniel Stuckey at number 20 last season. It's a young roster, but it's one that I think has got a ton of upside. And if one of those guys pops, if one of Hardaway, Edwards, Gadzuric, or Stuckey pops, you've got yourselves a really, really good group. Let's head to Washington now. They're at 18, and they're going to take Zelion Page. This is a name you had as more of a second round pick. He jumps all the way up to number 18. That to me is a shock.
This is the first pick that I would classify this one as that's a reach.
Hmm.
And again, it's not necessarily a knock on the player. It's just you probably could have waited. Really quick controlled dribble, good distributor. But 6'1", 178. That's small. That's small by NBA standards right there. He's great on the defensive end as far as getting steals, getting in people's pockets. But I didn't see enough from him to take him where they are. Maybe you could have slid back in the 28, 29 range. I had him at 32 on my big board, but I think it's a bit of a reach there for the Wizards.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking to find something off the bench. They had a really bad injury season. Washington did before last season, 5 year stretch. They had the second most wins in the league behind Golden State with Cole Anthony, Zane Bennett, and Devin Anderson. Marcel Hampton's still there. They added Franklin Knox. This is a team with few issues. So I think if the only pass I'll give them is they're making a big swing at something. But the problem is, I think there's better swings out there. Like Dorian Knight. I know he's had his issues, but he's a great 3-point shooter. George Hoffman. He's a point guard with a fantastic 45.7% shooter last season. Heck, you could add a wing, like a big, but like Isai Musli, who shot 38%. I'm not
I
saying
mean,
there's anything wrong with Page. It just seems like you said, a reach for guys. There's probably better swings earlier up in the draft.
there were 4 or 5 point guards I would have taken over Page
Right.
right
Ira Mack, a great other example,
here.
who's a guy who spent 4 years at Iowa and now he's still on the board. So here comes Boston at number 19. Uh, they are trying to find something to build around, and they are going to take Dorian Knight out of Kentucky. We just talked about him. That's a team I know plenty of teams were interested in getting. Best wing 3-point shooter, and he's headed to Boston.
Yeah, and the lights are going to shine bright in Boston for him. That maybe that'll be a good thing, maybe that'll be a bad thing, but I love this fit for Boston. I love the fit for Dorian. Hopefully he settles into that system. Hopefully he doesn't have any issues on or off the court like we kind of saw at Kentucky this last year. But they needed help at wing. And so I think this is a great spot for him. He might crack that starting lineup day one.
You said it. And I think you're putting him into an environment that's pretty positive. That was the big concern about Dorian Knight was, is he going to be able to, keep his emotions in check? And now there's a clear pecking order with Amari Swift and Xavier Carter that Dorian Knight's not going to be capable of kind of outbursts, right? He's going to be having to stay in his lane. I think that's a great roster to help him do that. New Orleans, with their third pick of the first round, they're going to take Ira Mack out of Iowa. We just talked about him when we talked about Zelian Page. Great 3-point shooter, really, really good playmaker, can kind of keep things under control. You had him number 13 on your board and he falls all the way to 20. I think this is a great pickup for a team that one needs shooting and two now has a secondary playmaker you can bring in off the bench.
Yeah, and in one of my original mocks, I had them take in Arturas Carney out of North Carolina because he is a nice upperclassman, help balance out that current youth movement that they're looking at, give them a veteran leadership at a position they need. And you know what? They did the exact same thing there with Ira Mack. veteran presence. They probably didn't think Iron Mac was going to be there at 20 for him. Maybe he slid a little bit. I probably had him ranked a little bit higher because I love his game, but I think that's a really solid pick, and he'll come along great with those rookies when they all bond together. All those first, second year players, he's going
Yeah.
to be kind of a steady veteran presence despite being just a rookie.
All right, Indiana on the clock at number 21, and they are going to take Ivan Shved out of Ukraine, 6'8", 251 forward. Maybe a little high. I think you had him in the second round. Am I right on that one?
He was sitting tail end of the first round, so maybe a little bit high, but as a foreign big guy, can play either post position, pretty strong. Actually pretty solid 3-point shot. He could real strong. He's a force to be reckoned with. Works well in the pick and roll. I think is about the right spot for Shved.
Look, Pacers are they're going to hit a cap crunch. Caden Dickerson's a free agent. Patrick Williams is a free agent. This is a team that was $40 million into the luxury tax. They're projected to be, I think, 2 million under the new league change, which moved the luxury tax up. But you're looking at a 10% increase in the luxury tax penalty. So I think this would strike me as a move of maybe Patrick Williams is gone and they're going to push their chips, their financial chips at Caden Dickerson because this is a team that made it to the conference finals last season. Prior to the injury of CJ McCoy, this was the number one record in the league. They've got good wings. They've got good big men in Corey Wilson and J.K. Foye. Adding Shved to that rotation plus Ibrahim Mobley, I really don't hate it. It's just this is a team that's really trying to figure out the financials of it. And this feels kind of like a move where we think we're going to get a guy who's 20. We could step in and maybe play a little bit more than the average rookie would at this point in the draft. Head over to Oklahoma City, where they are now on the clock, and they're going to take Sol J. Crab out of North Carolina. This is a big fall from you, Cam. I mean, you had him, Crab was all the way up at number 11 on your big board, and he ends up falling all the way down to 22.
Yeah, I think we're just seeing a bunch of centers starting to slide. I had them take in either Snyder, McCoy, or Moosley, one of those three, kind of the next tier of centers, if you will. That I was not expecting them to get the number 3 center on my big board. So I think that's a win. It's a good fit. I like the pick for the Thunder there.
You're looking at your backups. You're looking to fill rotational pieces right now, and I think Oklahoma City does that because behind Samaj Bishop, they really struggled last season. The Thunder did to have a reliable backup big man. And look, no one's going to expect Crab to step in and play 25 minutes a game, but I think he's got at least the size and the physicality to replicate a lot of what we saw out of Bishop last season. So for Oklahoma City, when you've got Tobias Bell at the point, you've got Michael Chasen and Noja Sesnoskas that kind of build out that rotation. This is a nice rotational piece to come off the bench for Oklahoma City. Adding another big at a position that we've seen across the league is constantly trying to add better, reliable backups. Here come the Bucks, and they're going to take DeMar Hagan. Now, you talked about Hagan during the pre-draft, rising up a lot of boards, but also at the same time fell down because of his defensive issues towards the end of the season. He ends up here at 23 for Milwaukee.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I wasn't entirely sure why he was sliding down draft boards, but he did. I like what we see out of him in Nevada for what we say the first 30 games of the year.
Mhm.
Looked every bit as a lottery pick. Stretch 4, averaged 16 points per game this year as a freshman. It just to me it screams lottery pick, and don't get it. I think the Bucks just got a steal there.
At 23, I mean, they could use all the steals they can get. They have Jules Petrus, who I thought had a really great postseason last year. He was their leading scorer in that 7-game defeat to Orlando. That's ahead of Dwayne Qualls. That's ahead of Luka Doncic. They've got Marcus Young. I thought the one thing that they actually kind of had locked down was the center position. And I also thought that Jules Petrus should be playing the 5. Mario Zoric and Adrian Harper at the 5. I thought, look, if you moved Petrus, if he got better at rebounding, which he did last season, he kind of slots in as a nice stretch 5. And now with Hagan, again, we're projecting guys out for a couple seasons, but if you're Milwaukee, you kind of have to make that projection because of the future of Luka Doncic being kind of up in the year 35, 36 years old. I don't mind this. If you're getting a guy, like you said, that's high up in the class, I think this is a good piece for them. it's not the best piece in the world, but at 23, you're also not getting the best piece in the world. Said to the Lakers, who come off a sweep in the conference finals, and they're going to take Logan Warwick out of Florida. Really great 3-point shooter, Cam. Not a bad piece for a team that needs 3-point shooting.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of the other Florida wing power forward of the day, Chandler Parsons. He, just does everything the right way. Smooth stroke, looks good, good height. Um, 3-point specialist, but developed nicely over the course of 3 years. And he's com- complemented his game really nicely over these last 3 years. Doesn't do anything great by any means besides shoot the basketball, but does everything else well enough that he'll stick in the NBA for years to come.
Now, as we head to Atlanta at 25, really the big notable name on your board that's still available is Dash Bular, who you had at number 12. I'd be surprised if we see him go here. The other big names left, Elijah McCoy, still on the board for this squad. And it's going to be Izai Musli out of Turkey. You had him at number eight, or number 18. Really great stretch big, 38.4% from deep for Turkey last season. Another addition for an Atlanta team that's really starting to come into shape pretty well.
Yeah, I think Atlanta's knocked this draft out of the park so far. Maybe I would have taken Elijah McCoy over him. I think I just liked him as a prospect a little bit better, but they're still taking guys that have been falling down draft boards. Uh, they're doing a great job here.
So we head to Sacramento at 26. They had the big trade last season for Jason Sanders, and they're going to take Arturas Carney. You had him. It's about that range. You had Carney at number 29 or number 30 on your draft board. He ends up out of North Carolina with Sacramento.
Yeah, no, he'll be like I said, same thing as Ira Mack. He's not a veteran, but he's going to give you that good veteran presence. He's a 3-year starter at North Carolina, pure point guard, facilitates so well. Always going to give you 110% while he's out there on the floor, and there's no one else you would rather have running your offense than Carney.
All right, as we move to 27, here comes the Miami Heat. They come off that disappointing 3-1 series blown, and they're going to take Reese Freeman out of Creighton. Talented power forward. Does a lot of good things with the ball. He's a good shooter. This is a nice stretch piece for a young team that could use some shooting.
Yeah, no, he's a fantastic player. Lit up March Madness, became a fan favorite through that. Knocks down shots all over the floor. Hard worker, team leader. And he's not as bad as everybody seems to think he is at defense. Still has a long way to go, but he was not a great defender as a freshman, sophomore. But I think that this is a guy that could end up being one of the hidden gems of this draft class.
28, we go for the Cleveland Cavaliers, and they're going to take Lovro Tavkar out of Slovenia. You had him a late first round grade, Cam. Nice piece, athletic big, more of a defensive big, not somebody that we'd expect to see too much from on the offensive end.
No, you're not going to get a ton of scoring out of him. But if you're the Cavs picking at this spot, you've got your scoring shirt up. Maybe like we said, we're seeing a shift on defense. He's a guy that'll be able to give you minutes, not as a scorer, but as a defensive guy and a rebound guy.
And Cleveland trying to build around Jair Dooling. Again, they traded away Jason Sanders last season. You need all the upside you can get. I don't know how much upside is left here at this point in the draft as we get to Utah. And breaking news, as it has been announced by ESPN's Anthony Nojic, the Toronto Raptors have moved up to 29. And in exchange, the Utah Jazz have traded for Jalen Justice out of Toronto. Cam, this might be the biggest draft night trade, off-season trade. The reigning MVP is headed to Utah to play with Darius Dixon. The full details of the trade. It's the 29 overall pick plus Utah's 2036 for Jacob Cuxick and Lucas Alvarez as well, all for Jalen Justice. He is now going to be paired with Darius Dixon.
Yeah, my jaw hit the floor when I saw that come across my phone. My first thought is if he re-signs with Utah, that is the biggest draft
Yeah.
or trade heist in the history of the NBA. to get a dude of that caliber for 2 first-round picks. Is it a rental? I don't think it is. I think he's going to love playing next to Dixon. You're going to see the best 1-2 combo in the league. Maybe you could argue Javon Roll and his brother that are better than them, but
Yeah.
man, that is a 1-2 combo for the ages there.
That is an incredible move. I talked about this in my offseason preview that, and we talked about it briefly during the draft preview. There's a chance for a discount because you have to be comfortable with giving up something for Jalen Justice. And I think you're right. Utah can say, come on into town. You're going to play with an all NBA guard, a guy that 2 seasons ago should have been the NBA MVP, and you're going to get to play with him. He's 22 years old, and we're going to have the best backcourt, bar none, in the NBA. This is to your point, a heist as it is, not now necessarily, but it darn well could be. And the cost of your 2036 first, which would be 2 years from now. So, of course, Jalen Justice would potentially not be on the roster. And Jacob Cuxix, who's a 32-year-old point guard on an expiring. I love this trade if I'm Utah. If I'm Toronto, I'm not ecstatic, but I'm happy that I'm getting something out of this and not nothing. And it's one more run at it for the Raptors with a bunch of guys in their 30s, low 30s. We saw Miami have a lot of experience on this, but I think this is a good move for Toronto with the best you could get. Clearly, they thought they couldn't retain Jalen Justice next summer.
Yep.
All right, so that means Toronto is now picking, and they're going to take Elijah McCoy at the 5. That's a guy you had at 16, Cam. Good, big, athletic rebounder for the Memphis Tigers last season. He's headed to Toronto.
Yep, Run. He didn't get the nickname Run EMC for not being athletic. He's a rim runner, and I think he's going to be linked to Jalen Justice for years to come.
Yep.
And so you don't see pressure on the 29th pick in the NBA draft like you do on Elijah McCoy, or like you typically do. But he ultimately, what he does is going to define how this trade works out for them. And so I think that they didn't swing for the fences because it's, like I said, pick 29, but he's got all the upside in the world. And so I think that's a great pick right there, and a great start to kind of retooling, if you will, after watching Jalen Justice walk out the door.
Yeah, I mean, this is not a big swing. I don't think McCoy becomes an elite point guard, or excuse me, center by any stretch. But yes, the name McCoy and Justice are now forever combined at the hip, and Toronto is starting the post-Justice era with Elijah McCoy is not what I had on my bingo card. All right, that puts Brooklyn on the clock here, and they're going to take Alan Kinsey out of Auburn. Cam, this is a guy, Kinsey, I think you had as a second-round grade. As I'm trying to find him on your big board at 38 out of
Yeah,
Tulsa.
he's down there.
Excuse me, out of Auburn. Your thoughts?
Probably a reach. There are Dash Bular still out there, Deli
Right.
Bagley still out there, George Hoffman, and those are all different positions. I guess maybe they were pigeonholed into, hey, we're looking at a 4, and at this point, he's my second best 4 that was left on the big board. So maybe they kind of pigeonholed themselves with that. I keep kind of forgetting we're at the tail end of the first round. It's not as bad of a reach as I thought.
Sure.
I think that it's an okay pick. Is it a great pick? No, he's still raw. He's athletic. And we just saw that one pick earlier with Elijah McCoy. Raw, athletic, can jump out the gym. It's not as bad of a pick as I originally thought. I maybe a little undersized for the position, but they probably about right for Kinsey.
Well, it's a team that's been, linked heavily to Savion White with the impending free agency of both White and Morgan. They've got Brighton Reed. They've got Rashawn Matthews. Again, we've talked about adding depth, and I think that's what they're doing here. I mean, the story of all these late drafts is obviously going to be what doesn't necessarily happen tonight. This story is Jalen Justice. I think this aftermath is this is going to be a fog of who comes in at 30 through the rest of the draft. Golden State now on the clock here. And the Golden State Warriors are going to take Dele Bagley out of Gonzaga. an elite defender, a guy with a ton of defensive upside. He's not a great scorer, Cam, but this, if you harken back to the early days of this Warriors dynasty, they put Chris Dunn off the bench behind Javon, or at the time, Steph Curry. This kind of feels like the new age Chris Dunn. Plus, it's a guy that you had very, very high on your draft board, and he falls all the way to the end of the first round.
Yeah, I had him at number 10 on my draft board, and so they did it again. They people are letting the Warriors get away with it. They took a top 10 guy at 31. My concerns with the pick, I don't know how well he meshes with this team. My only thought here is, this Warriors team, what was the issue scoring off the bench for them?
Hmm.
They averaged a league worst 21.7 points per game from their bench this last season. And to put that into perspective, the next closest was the Hornets at 25.6. And so, mind you, their big three average 80 points per game, and Jalen House graduated to that starting lineup. But I thought they would have been targeting someone maybe like a Cameron Pressey right there, or a Dash Boular, George Hoffman, someone who could come in and light up maybe 12 to 15 points per game
Right.
off the bench as opposed to a Deli Bagley. But at the end of the day, they're getting a top 10 prospect at 31. That's fantastic right there. It's just not what I thought they were going to end up doing.
Now they've got serious size issues, right? Dele Bagley's 6'3", but he's got a 6'11" wingspan. Javon Roll's 6'4". Jalen House is 6'3", 6'4". Their backcourt is small. That really, if they played against Phoenix, was going to be the big question mark for them. I wonder if they're just taking we're going to add size and shooting in free agency, and we're going to take high upside guys in the draft. I thought they had a really great campaign from Branko Todorovic. I wondered if that would prevent them from taking Bagley. Clearly, it didn't. But I would expect them now to be very aggressive in free agency because, yeah, you end up with a guy that can't shoot the ball from deep, 22.7. That being said, they did develop Jaheim Briggs from being a 30% shooter into a low 40s, high 38% shooter from deep. So they can do it. This feels like maybe, like you said, we're getting a top 10 guy at the end of the class. We're just going to take a swing and we're going to see if we can come up with it. Last pick here of the first round, that's going to be Orlando as they head to the offseason as NBA champions for the first time, and they take Jawan Zusman out of Maryland. You had him late second round, Cam. A pretty good spot for them, for the defending champs to add a nice big wing.
Yeah, he out of Maryland, freshman. He's bouncy. Just didn't put it all together this year. And with you being the Orlando Magic, you've got time to develop guys because Trey Hunter's not going anywhere. Jalen Green's got a couple years left on him. They've got time to try and develop Jawan Zusman to be one of these next guy. He's got star potential. But it was a rough first year at Maryland for him.
All right, draft is concluded. Mr. Whatever the NBA wants to call it is BJ Long to the Timberwolves at number 32. Um, Cam, we saw some excitement. I mean, the big story of this draft is the one is the Clippers get Javon Boston at number 3. The second big story, which kind of comes in and swoops this whole thing up, is Jalen Justice getting dealt to Utah. You walk out of draft night. What is the biggest takeaway for you?
Hard to say anything other than Jalen Justice, and that trade that we saw there. I mean, trade after trade, just thought. I mean, time after time, I was like, "There's no way this is happening. We're letting the best player in the NBA get out of here for 2 first-round picks, in my opinion. Not enough, but
Hmm.
you know what? It is what it is, and I'm still my jaw's still on the floor.
All right, so let's go best pick of the draft. That's not Didi McDice or Javon Boston. I think those are kind of cheap ones. So your best pick in the draft is.
I'm going to give you 2 things here. My best fit, number one, was Luis Kuzma to the Pistons right there. That was just an insane pick. Insane fit. Works so great. He's going to be great around Gianni Giddens. And then, I hate giving the Warriors any more kudos than they already are been getting, but Deli Bagley at that pick is just unfair that they're letting a top 10 prospect squeak all the way down to the Warriors. It's like we didn't see him win enough that we're just going to give him more help down there. So I mean, fantastic pick there. And then, I did like the Derek Hardaway, Dorian Knight at the end of the teens right there. I think those are 2 great picks. Dorian Knight, Ira Mack, Derek Hardaway. That's insane value right there for the Hawks, for the Celtics, for the Pelicans. I think the Pelicans had a pretty solid draft.
I'd say my favorite pick, if I'm boiling it down to one, I like Trey Orton and what the Grizzlies did. Their draft night as a whole to get Jermaine Rhodes at 5 and Trey Orton at 15. That was the opportunity cost of not getting Luis Kuzma at 4. And I think that was a great decision by them for a team, again, that does not have draft picks of their own over the next couple seasons. That's going to be, in my opinion, the the best fit for them now and into the future. This last one as we wrap up, the worst pick in your opinion. Again, these are rookies. Who knows what's going to come of them, but worst pick.
Yeah, I thought it at the time is probably that Zellion Page pick. He just wasn't the pick. If you want a point guard, we saw Deli Bagley slide. We saw George Hoffman slide. You could have got George Hoffman in the second round, who I think is a better player than Zellion Page. Ira Mack was there. There were 5 point guards that I liked over Zellion Page that were sitting right there. It's I don't think that was the best pick in the draft. So I think I'm probably zeroing in on that right there.
I would say the Knicks at 11. Joko Soluwade, he's a 21-year-old athlete, and an athlete is fine, but at 21, what's his upside going to be? Um, the Knicks are clearly in project mode, right? I wouldn't be surprised if they try to find a way to get off of Zion Williamson's deal this summer. But to me, with just who was still on the board there, you had Trey Orton, who I liked better than Soluwade. You had guys, Gorbenko, who went next, Antoine Okoro, who I thought was a better piece than Soluwade, and those guys are still on the board. It's just a reach to me for the Knicks at 11 at a time when they really need to start nailing their picks because they haven't been making their own because of that Zion Williamson deal, and they're not going to be getting any better over the next couple seasons. That's it, Cam. That's our 2034 NBA draft. Cam, appreciate you taking the time out to not only preview this thing, hit it with us live, and a quick recap at the end. It has been a true pleasure. So thanks for coming on and look forward to doing this again.
Absolutely. You take care, man.